Good morning. Welcome to Zen Glop, the podcast, music and poetry, meditation, and other assorted topics as the whim compels us, as the wind drives us, as the thoughts make themselves apparent. Today, it's been a while. It's been a while since the last podcast. If I check my calendar, it's probably been almost a month, which is far too long. I have no excuses, but I do want to talk today about dogs. Two dogs in particular, one from Greek myth and one from contemporary American science fiction. Not that contemporary, Kurt Vonnegut, and maybe not science fiction either. Unless you would consider Sirens of Titan a science fiction book, which I suppose you could. Written in the late 50s, early 60s, so hardly contemporary either, but there you go. Language sucks. So I'm going to talk about Homer's dog, Argos. Actually, Odysseus's dog, Ulysses's dog, Argos, and then Kazak, the space hound from Kurt Vonnegut's Sirens of Titan. And I'm compelled to think about this right now. My dog died a few weeks ago, which is tremendously sad. And the attachment that a human has to a dog is weird, isn't it? It's weird and wonderful, and dogs are loving and noble and strong and protective. They are companionable. They are soft and embracing. Dog nature covers a pretty broad spectrum of some of the foundational capabilities that we also can cultivate as humans. Dogs may not be self-reflexive in a way that the human being is. I would accept that. I think that dogs are emotionally aware, but there is a distinction between human consciousness and dog consciousness, and we do well to recognize that and to cultivate and nurture those characteristics within ourselves that I can see reflected in the dog. The Buddhist ideas of the four immeasurables. So you come from a position of kindness. And there's nothing as kind as a puppy or a dog. I mean, we can train a dog to be quite vicious, and some people do. And in some cases, that's appropriate. A dog who has a purpose for protection or guidance, service, can cultivate that aspect. But even the most ferocious dog is kind in the privacy and comfort and security of their own home. Kindness and then compassion. From that kindness, we move out and behave compassionately. We're using skillful means. Joy. There's nothing as joyful as a happy dog, right? and equanimity. And perhaps that's where humans and dogs diverge. I don't know that I think of dogs as being equanimous. Animals are stoic in the face of their suffering, particularly their final suffering. It's incredibly difficult to know if your dog is ill until it's just too late. And our dog, Reggie, had routine vet trips, and we just didn't know. We couldn't tell. And even up until the last few days, the extent of his illness and suffering was not apparent. And then it was. Very much so. So the dog and the four immeasurables. And yeah, perhaps equanimity is not a characteristic you associate with a dog. Exuberance. But then maybe that's my misunderstanding of the word equanimity. So 2 stories then about other dogs. I'm not today going to talk about Laika. Those of you who are more regular listeners or who are who follow some of my other writing know that I am working on an opera based on the space dog program. Laika, Laika. Laika was the first being in space, the first terrestrial being. It was a dog as part of the Soviet space program, Laika. So I'm writing an opera about that story. I started it over a year ago, and I just haven't applied myself to it. And those kinds of things do not write themselves. So, 2 other dogs then. So Argos was Odysseus's dog. And so, of course, Odysseus goes off to the Trojan Wars and then takes his time getting back, the Odyssey. And by the time he returns, it's been 20 years. And you're all familiar with the stories of the Odyssey and of the scenario that he returns to, right? His palace has been overtaken by the young nobles of the island and surrounding islands who are seeking to take his place as king, marry Penelope, and become the king, the ruler. So Ulysses has a son, Telemachus, on the island, and a swineherd who is the first person that Ulysses interacts with when he returns to the island. And in fact, the swineherd, whose name escapes me right now, I should have checked that before I started this, recognizes Ulysses. Even though Ulysses is in disguise, he's dressed himself as a poor person, and he's also been additionally disguised by Athena. Athena has cast a spell over him so that his natural majestic bearing, even after 20 years of hardship, he still has strength and nobility that will be apparent to everybody. So Athena casts a spell to hide that. But it doesn't fool the noble swineherd, who is the first person, but not the first being. The first being that Ulysses interacts with is his dog, Argos, who is absolutely ancient at this point, right? 20 years plus, because he had been a hound with Ulysses before Ulysses went to the Trojan War. And this dog has been mistreated and neglected, and is by the side of the road. Ulysses walks up, recognizes his dog, Argos, And the dog recognizes Ulysses and rallies to welcome him home. And then he dies. It's a good dog. I remember as a young boy, younger than 10, with a copy of the Odyssey that was a children's version. It had been published by Penguin, I guess, and it was one of the books I'd gotten through the school book sale. And I was reading it, and I got to that bit at the end, and I couldn't believe it. I was so sad. I remember sitting on the couch. I can remember not a whole lot about that house and that period of life, but I remember reading that part of the story, and I can recall the color of the couch I was sitting on. It was sort of green and blue striped, very British 70s style, and just breaking out into tears at that scene. And it still is a very potent scene. I think when I'm done with the Space Dog opera, I may write a second called Homer's Dog. And it's the story of the dog while Ulysses is gone. And the same with the Laika opera. These dogs have additional characteristics associated with them during the opera. They can speak and they can act in ways that dogs don't normally do. And in Homer's Dog, in the second dog opera, I envision Argos speaking with the Greek philosophers, and it will be asynchronous. So he may speak not just with the truly ancient Greeks, but also with the 5th century. So he can skip around in time. He might even meet the Buddha. There's a nice idea that the Buddha wandered through Greece. There's no history in that, but it will be in my opera. So this dog meets Socrates and Buddha, and the opera would be these series of dialogues and stories. Quite wonderful. So that's one good dog, Argos. Then the second one, in Sirens of Titan, which is Kurt Vonnegut's first novel, certainly the first successful novel, I think. There's an awful lot happening in that book, but one of the threads is a character called Winston Rutherford and his dog Kazakh, and at some point while tinkering around with things, Rutherford enters into a chronosynclastic infundibulation, which essentially means that he is dematerialized and moving in an enormous sort of frequency pattern through the galaxy, materializing at particular points, physical points, in a predictable pattern, kind of like a comet returns. So for example, every, whatever it is, 6 months or so, he materializes in the living room of his mansion. He was a rich man. And so his wife knows to expect him. She's not entirely happy about that. And gradually, crowds of people come to expect him. And it becomes a bit of a novelty. And his dog is with him, Kazakh. They materialize throughout the galaxy together. And I like to think, and it's only intuited in the book, that Rutherford and Kazakh find solace in each other's company. I don't think Rutherford finds the condition unpleasant, but there's no evidence what Kazakh thinks, except that he appears to be happy to materialize with Winston, because he's a good dog. There's a heartbreaking intimation in the story that at some point the two of them will move out of phase. And that makes me very sad to think about that. So, I miss my dog Reggie. We've lost, dogs have a shorter life. Reggie was our third dog, not in sequence. And he was 12-ish. We're not entirely sure how old he was when he came into our lives, maybe 2 or 3-ish. And at some point we'll get another dog, but right now it's too soon. I go downstairs in the morning, and my instinct is to see him waiting at the door to go out. And now there's no reason to open the door. It's the first time in 20 years that there has not been a dog in the house. For a while we had two dogs. One of them was Reggie. The other was a young beagle. And I'm getting older as well, and these things just get harder. So we'll get another dog because the companionship of a dog is valuable, but at the moment it would still be it would be unfair. I would be comparing. But that won't last forever, I know, and that also makes me sad that the history becomes a story, and the sadness stops being an actual emotion and starts becoming a story of sadness. So anyway, it's good to be back doing podcasts. I'm going to try and do 2 a week, and I'm also going to try and be much more disciplined in my YouTube channels. I got some ideas for projects over the summer that might turn into short movies, and then of course the Messiaen essays continuing. So all of you, keep your wits about you. I'll be back on Thursday.